Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Six Rings King Show on a new night, Monday night now, baby. We're really excited actually to have Eric McLean on the show here, college football analyst, co-host of the Huddle. Coach, yes, all right.
First touchdown of the year.
Miami Hurricanes, yeah. You know the name already. It's Mercy. Ha ha. It's a six-ring Kane show. Can't forget the name though. Got Jazz, Blue, Vision, DJ, break the game code. Ain't no changing them, ain't no breaking them. Real Portland live from the Hard Rock Stadium. Ball 14 for the orange and green. We see the six-ring champs. It's more than a dream. This is life on the field. Beyond 100 yards of Hurricane that's never still put a damage to your squad.
What's wrong with us? Seriously.
What's wrong with us? We're Miami Hurricanes fans.
Welcome to the Six Rings Kane Show, a show dedicated to Miami Hurricane sports, featuring the legendary Larry Bluestein, Jazz Santana, Vish, and Danny Gillette. Let's go Canes.
I really can't get over that last part. I love that last part.
That was spontaneous too. It looks like a setup.
It was perfect.
I was annoyed.
Welcome everybody to the Six Rings Canes pregame show today, as the Miami Hurricanes are set to face the Virginia Tech Hokies in about an hour or so, right? Yeah, 12:30 tip-off on. By the way, for anybody that's in ACC territory, as Vish mentioned on Twitter as well, this is probably going to be a local thing, so maybe check Bally's. I know that's where we'll be watching it, on the Bally's Sports Network. So make sure, if you guys don't know yet, that's the news coming out when it comes to
the way it works is they designate Valley. There's like some weird TV contract when you get down to these. We've lost to Middle Tennessee games, so we get put on these types of things. But basically, Bally's has like a secondary contract, or that network, so only for ACC states. So if you're not in what they call an ACC state, it is just on the ESPN app, like normal ESPN streaming stuff. But if you're in an ACC state, they black it out because Bally's owns the rights. So it won't work on your ESPN app, and you have to find it on whatever local channel or whatever streaming they offer. So
or the home shopping network, whatever it's.
I mean, up here, so where I am, I don't know why I'm considered ACC territory, because Maryland left alone. I guess Virginia's here. I'm like right in between Maryland and Virginia.
Right. Yeah.
But they put it on some random channel that just shows Orioles games.
On Bally's? On Bally's, right?
I don't have Bally's because Bally's doesn't extend this far, but it's like Masson or whatever.
That's wild. That's so crazy.
So it's a pain to find these games.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But anyways, listen, it's an important game for the Miami Hurricanes, obviously, as we all know. We've got some news to go over in just a second. But look, it's not a very good Virginia Tech football team. However, it's Virginia Tech, and you know that they're one of our rivals. So I think the Canes are going to have to come out ready to play, especially in Blacksburg, even though it's not a night game in Blacksburg with Enter Sandman, but it's still Blacksburg. It's still Virginia Tech. However, they've been struggling this year. Record of 2-4, just like us, right? We're 2-3 as well. So this is definitely a must-win game for the Miami Hurricanes. I want to get you all's take on just kind of like the state of things right now with the Hurricanes, how important this game is, and what they can expect to kind of face when they go into Blacksburg today to face the Hokies. We'll start with you, Blue.
I think coming off a game that kind of was a character test against, and I'll maintain, I think North Carolina is one of the best teams in the ACC, probably one of the best offenses in the country. And I think Miami showed, and especially in the second half and down the stretch, that this team's responding to the coaching. I mean, you are what you are as far as talent and your depth, but I think this is where the coaching's taken over. And I was impressed at how Miami stayed the course last week. That game could have unraveled, as well as I do. That game could have really got ugly. But the kids that I think the coaching, the preparation, it was impressive, to down to the end. Still disappointing with a loss, but you know what? I think you look back in 2 years at all these games this year, and you go, wow, there were some growing pains then, and that's what's happening. And as far as Blacksburg, you're 100% right. I've been there before. It's not an easy place to play. Like you said, thank goodness it's not 7:30 and Enter Sandman and the hallways are bustling, as they're making their way over, a quarter of a mile under the tunnels. And, but you know what? They're a different type of team. They're in a transition, but they still have dudes, they still have Malachi comes back at running back. It looked like a whole different kind of offense, and it's a sellout. It's homecoming. It's a sellout. A lot of their alumni, they're feeling the same way that Miami alumni feel. We got to turn this thing around. We can't fool around. Let's win over Miami, and at least we salvaged the first part of the season. Their Achilles, where Miami lost to Middle Tennessee State, they lost to Old Dominion, probably, which is worse because it's right there. It's not far from where they're at. And I'm sure they heard it, just like when Miami lost to FIU, you kind of hear a lot more. But, they're going, like I said, is this the same type of Virginia Tech that Miami used to go into and really be up against it? No. But like I said, they still have kids that they have like 2-3 high 4-stars that they recruited in the past that are still with the program that Justin Fuente had. So a dangerous game for Miami, and they still got to come out, as you and I say, Jazz. Mario Cristobal can't be the only one that's fired up. Everybody else has got to come out of that, because as well as I do, he'll be fired up for every darn game. And it's almost not fair for your coach to be bouncing off the walls while you guys are just like ho-hum. So I hope they come out and use that adversity as far as the crowd to their advantage.
Vish, before I get to you on this, I think, Blue, you brought up a great point that I think the average crazy Miami Hurricane fan that's a little bit more irrational than some of us will see that game last week and say, we weren't coached well, we weren't ready to play, we screwed up so much, we made these mental errors. And then you kind of have to bring it back in, right? Kind of take a step back and look and say, hold on a second, like, that's not knee jerk. You hit it right on the head, if you ask me, right? Like, these guys, the kids that are out there are playing hard, right? It's not, we've noticed that sometimes there's certain players that take a play off or that don't have that effort and intensity. And you're going to start to see that Mario is not going to play those games. He's not going to put those guys out on the field much, right? So you're starting to see that already, because we noticed that last game. But you're starting to see some of the players that are trying to, fit this culture and kind of get in line, starting to make those plays, starting to be the type of players that Mario wants. And you saw it in their fight. You saw it in the way that they played last week. Can they bring it over to this week and get the W? Vish, I think it's important to kind of highlight that, because, a lot of people are down thinking that this team, there's no effort, there's no intensity, when it's the absolute it's the opposite of that. Sometimes we don't have the dudes, and in some places we do.
Yeah, and I think that was a fair criticism against Middle Tennessee. I don't think we were prepared to play that game. I don't think we had the energy. And I think if you lobbed it at that game,
right,
I think that's fair. As Blue said, like, we were on the brink of getting blown off the field last week, and those kids fought back. And, break here or there, or, one more play, and you win that game. I will say the one thing, though, we've seen this before. You can only lose so many times before just the air goes out. So they need to win this game. It's a winnable game, and once they start winning, then the effort pays off with the win. Then you can string some things together, because there is a good team in here, and they're playing hard. It's just mistakes and one problem here or there. These are all very close games. I mean, and that's as you said, as the fans lose their minds, start screaming, and then they're like, "Yeah, remember that one play?" I'm like, if you're in that situation, we're close. Right? I mean, if you're like saying, "Oh, if we could have made that one play," or they screwed up that one player, Gaddis made that one call I don't like, that means you're actually close to being good. So there is a good team in here. The one thing I think is really important today, we got to start faster. We got to get up early, because we have not – here's a stat for you. We have not had the lead since Southern Miss. we've just been playing from behind all the time. Even as we're dominating the game against Texas A&M, we're playing from behind anyway. So
and that's always tough. That's tough.
Yeah, it's just, and that ramps up the pressure. Some of these drops, it's like you start pressing. So you're like, I got to get us back in the lead, especially when you're outplaying the other team. Because you're like, we're playing well and we're losing, and it does ramp up that pressure. Like, Middle Tennessee was different. We were not playing well. But when you're playing well and the score doesn't reflect it, the pressure goes way up. Because you're like, we're already playing well. Because if you're playing bad and you fall behind, you're like, all right, we got to play better.
Right.
But if you're playing well and the score isn't reflecting it, it really does make it a lot more pressure. And we've just been playing behind every single game. It puts pressure on those long drives because you've got this pressure. Now we got to finish this because we're behind. So, yeah, starting fast, score early, get up, and then I think we'll see this game out pretty easily, frankly. Virginia Tech is not good this year. But if they get up, that they're like Blue says, homecoming, sell out, they do have some dudes. So it's not going to be easy in that sense. So if we don't get up early, if we fall behind and have to chase the game again, it's going to become very difficult. We got to get the lead early, and then we should be able to control the game from there. They're very bad against the run. I know we've struggled the last couple of weeks. We were able to run on A&M, who's another team that's bad against the run. So I think we can actually run the ball in this game. Yeah. And if you play with the lead, all of a sudden those long, slow drives everyone's complaining about are actually keeping the other team out of the game. You know, it flips on its head completely. When you're down a touchdown and you're going on a 7-minute drive, it's like, we got to score. But when you're up a touchdown, it's like, wow, we're taking away an opportunity for them to get back in the game. So,
right.
You know, playing with the lead will make a huge difference today. So I just got to start fast, get out in front, and then I think we'll be fine.
Well, Blue, Vish mentioned something really, it's a good point that he said, because you will see a different team when they're out with the lead, right? Potentially you can see them do some different things on offense and on defense that'll say, wow, this is a team that we want to see kind of light up the scoreboard, or, pin their ears back and go after the guy, the quarterback a little bit more, because this team, we've said it before, right? They don't know how to win yet. So how important is it going to be and I know it sounds really cliche to say that, but it's the truth, right? Like you haven't seen them play with the lead yet since Southern Miss. And those are, again, I know those are not the best teams, but Middle Tennessee kicked their ass. But the point is that how important for this team to get out in front, take a lead, and dominate the game from the beginning, right, with the lead as opposed to from behind, will kind of change the mentality and just moving forward how this team reacts to adversity, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I agree with Vish. You can't be chasing points, especially on the road. They got to put drives together. They got to put touchdowns together. I mean, they've got to take control from the beginning. They've got to let Virginia Tech know that we're not going to give you an opportunity, because and then Vish just said it. If all of a sudden Virginia Tech gets a 7-0 or 10-0 lead, that crowd's going to be relentless, and Miami's going to have to again go uphill. But this time it'll be on the road. At least last week after the Boo Birds hit, and that they didn't play very well, and then all of a sudden things started turning around because there was that energy, and that's the key. People, I was talking at a high school game last night with somebody, and we were talking how a team came out with energy, and they took a 7-0 lead. I mean, they didn't keep it, but the whole thing is they went out, took that 7-0 lead, and played the team who was a bigger favorite to a 7-6 first quarter lead. And that's what Miami needs to do. They need to establish themselves. Like you said, they can run the ball. They showed they could pass, and even though that North Carolina's defense might not be the best in the world, that team is really good. I look back at North Carolina, and they're going to win 9-10 games. So it's Miami knows they can play with the best. And that's the key. You can't, but you have to come out and make this. I think every game has to be urgent now, because you have 1 foot in the hole. You're pretty much to win, to get into the ACC title game. I mean, you have to just win.
You gotta win everything.
You have to win out. I mean, that's just the way it is. And if Miami has any hopes of doing that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, being honest, we'll sit here in maybe another year or two, and I'll say, well, Miami's got this and that, but being honest, I don't know if they have the talent to win out. I mean, there's going to be games there that are going to be pretty tough for them. Florida State's not going to come in and lay down. But today's essential because this is a team that, like next week against Duke, that they should beat, and I don't care if it's on the road. I look at some of these teams like Alabama. They go on the road against these teams that they're supposed to beat, and they win 42-6. And that's what Miami needs to do. I'm not saying they're going to win 42-6, but they've got to come out there and assert themselves and say, hey, we're the better product, and utilize all those offensive weapons and utilize those big play guys on defense. And I looked at the stats. I watched Coach Cristobal's press conference, the post-press conference, I think Tuesday. And the one thing that he talked about is he said, he says, we don't bother what people are saying. We know who the playmakers are. And as much as all these fans, I heard somebody at the game last week sitting there cutting down Corey Flagg. Corey Flagg leads the team in tackles by 26, So, I mean, if you're going to knock him, you might as well knock everybody else. But that's guys like that, guy like Cam Kinchins, who are making plays on the defensive side. I'm not worried about offense. I think the offense will click because now that they, as you guys alluded to on our show earlier the week, that now they're starting to use guys like Jaleel Skinner and Young and people who are making an impact in practice. So I'm not worried because those guys are hungry and they want to get on the field. And, I'm not saying they're going to be able to get Will Mallory back in that, because that's the weird thing about Miami over the last couple of years. They'll target somebody 7-8 times in one game and not go to them the next. I mean, that inconsistency kills me. But I'm not an offensive coordinator, but I would like to see them get Will Mallory involved again, because what he does is he opens up so many avenues for you. Because, like I said, and I've seen it before, going into last week's game, North Carolina did not respect Miami's ability to throw the ball, especially upfield. So they crowded the box. They had 8 guys, and I was pointing it out. When they snapped the ball, they had 9 guys in a box. And if Virginia Tech does that and Miami, and all of a sudden Van Dyke starts finding the Mallorys and, their short passing game, Miami will murder them, because they're going to be falling into a pit that they think, and I'm sure they watched the film against North Carolina and say, well, wait a minute. We're not going to be able to put 9 guys in a box because then he'll kill us. He's a great quarterback. He's smart. As long as kids are catching the ball. And like I said, Mallory could be one of those 8 catches for 95 or 100 yards and a couple of touchdowns. So, yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I think Miami in agreement, and I went around it in a long way, but Miami needs to come out and with just a sense of urgency. I think their defense will be fine. It's just their offense sometimes is so erratic. You don't know what's going to happen.
Speaking of playmakers and speaking of the offense, we've got to mention it. It looks like Michael Redding may be out for this game. He was not dressed in warmups. So, we're down a playmaker. But right now, as you mentioned, Blue, TVD spreading the football around a lot. Primarily a lot to his tight end, right, to Will Mallory. You saw it last week. And we saw, him hitting Frank Ladson and Brashard Smith and, Kobe Young at the end of the game. So, some more guys, as you mentioned again, are also starting to step up. So it's going to be important for TVD to continue to stay hot, for this offense to continue firing the football and throwing the ball around. But I think, Vish, what you mentioned is getting the running game going again. This offense again
in their red zone. Let me just add, their red zone offense sucks. I mean,
it's still terrible. But
because remember, I told you last week, I keep harping on it. It's great to use Rooster and what's the name? I can't even think it's off my head. Right. Yeah. But in between the 20s, it's fine, But when you get in that 20, if you don't use Thad Franklin, you're doing that offense a great injustice, because he's a big guy and he puts pounding in. Parrish is right. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's early in the morning, but But to me, when you get somebody like a Thad Franklin, 6'2", 240, 35 pounds down near the inside the 20, how come you're not using him more? I mean, that guy, to me, if he was like at Wisconsin, he'd be running 27 times for 190 yards every game. Yeah. Because he's that type of back. He's not going to break a lot of runs, but he'll get you 15 and 20 yards, and he'll wear down defenses. So I don't know what the phobia is with that offense, with Gaddis or Kevin Smith of using him. And I understand that maybe he's not the greatest practice player in the world, but you know what? Let's go around the country. There's a lot of dudes that probably don't practice well, but they show up on Saturday. So if he's the one guy that, you're having a little bit of problem with focusing during the week, you got to suck it up, because he's the valuable guy when you get inside that 20, because more times than not, he's going to gain you 3-4 yards, and that's going to add up to a touchdown or a first down. And yeah, so that's my pet peeve. And it has been, first it was Mallory, but then they started appeasing me, and then Mallory was dropping balls. So I couldn't bring that up anymore. But yeah, I'd like to see a lot more of Thad Franklin, especially because the red zone has been so non-existent sometimes.
Vish, your take on this offense, what they need to do in the red zone and just overall.
Honestly, I'm not as worried about it. I like everyone else, we could try different personnel, different play calling, but to me, things average out. Eventually, you can't keep moving the ball as much as we are and not scoring more points. So something's going to balance out. Either we're going to move it less or we're going to score more. And also, some of it, it's a combination of things. Some of it's bad luck, bad execution. Like, no one misses a tackle against us down there. We miss plenty of tackles. Like, how many touchdowns have we given up where we had the guy and he stretched it out? And so, sometimes the other team has to cooperate a little bit too. I mean, the North Carolina game, if they miss one of those tackles, we get a touchdown. We're not arguing about this. And they didn't miss a tackle that whole game from what I saw. So fair play to them. As Blue said, they're a really good team. They're well coached. But also, sometimes you score in the red zone because the other team makes a mistake. Linebacker fills the wrong hole. You walk into the end zone. Like, we just haven't. It's been a combination of a lot of things. We got a field goal block down there against A&M. It just hasn't clicked. We've dropped passes. It's all just eventually it'll even out. So I'm less worried about that. Like, you can't continue to move the ball as much as we are and then not score. So, and I'm more confident of the scores happening than the yardage going away, to be honest, because I think we're largely a good offense that's able to do a lot of things well and move the ball. So I'm not really worried about it. I'm hoping this is the week that the kind of the thing caves in and we finally start scoring touchdowns.
I think they'll put it together. And they'll definitely score some points in the red zone. We saw one really good drive on that slant route with Keyshawn literally right in the red zone, right? Because they were at the 20 when he scored that touchdown. But we definitely need to see some more.
Yeah, I think when we use red zone, we kind of mean like inside the 10. Like we've
inside
had,
the 10, right?
Yeah, but even so, twice against Middle Tennessee, one with TVD and one with Garcia at quarterback, and then once against North Carolina, we started first and go inside the 5 and didn't score.
Right.
That is where, and because we went for it on fourth, then obviously we could chip the field goal.
And this is, by the way, this is not an excuse, right?
Right.
The red zone is obviously the hardest place to score. It's the most condensed area of the field. The play calling becomes a little different. It becomes harder to get those plays going. But at the end of the day, you still have to score.
Right. But that's why I wanted to make that distinction. Right. It's not like if you get first and goal on the 10, that's like a worst case scenario. That's the hardest 10 yards to get in football. Right. We've been getting first and goal inside the 5 and not scoring. And that's why we're kind of harping on it. Like, honestly, if you get first and goal on the 10, you get 7 yards and have to think we're going to go for a kick and field. That's different than first and goal on the 3 and we can't get 3 yards in 4 plays. Like that is so I think if we can, there's different, the red zone's technically, like you said, inside the 20.
Right.
We're not getting to the 20 and not scoring. We're getting inside the 5 and not scoring. I think that's where the frustration, because at that point, when it's first and goal on the 3, you expect a touchdown. Absolutely. And we're not getting those. And I think that's where the frustration is coming from. But I do think that'll even out and we'll start to punch those in.
Let's turn it around to the defense. Really quick, before we get out of here, we'll do defense and then keys to the game. But the defense is going to match up against. Listen, there's some talented players in that Virginia Tech offense. Their quarterback is not a terrible guy. They've got a decent running back and a decent wide receiver. If you see here, I mean, they've got some dudes that can play a little bit. Okay, they've got Grant Wells as their quarterback. You've got Keyshawn King, and Caleb Smith is probably their big time playmaker on offense as well at wide receiver. So they like to spread it out a little bit. They like to throw the ball a little bit. They also like to run the ball. Okay, so they're pretty. I guess you can say a pretty stable offense, right? They like to do both. Okay, Coach, what's his name? Pry, is it? Or Fry? Yeah. Coach Pry, in his first season, is struggling a little bit, but he's got a lot of work to do over there. It's hard to follow up. I won't even mention Justin Puente, but it's hard to follow up with what Coach Beamer did there. Totally dominating that DMV area really for a long time, with getting some of the top players out there. So Virginia Tech's got some rebuilding to do, as you mentioned earlier, Blue. But still, some pretty good players, as I mentioned. Yeah. Grant Wells with 1,200 yards passing already, and Caleb Smith as well, catching the football. So what's this defense going to have to do? And we'll kind of keep it short so we can do keys to the game and get on out of here, because it's coming up on 12 now. But what are some of the things that this defense needs to do, Blue, to really neutralize that offense and turn it around and give it back to the offense so we can keep scoring points?
Well, obviously limit the big play. They're going to move the ball and they're going to do what they do. I mean, it's not going to be like North Carolina where, they can impose their will because they have a lot of kids that can do that. The thing about Wells is he's got more interceptions than touchdowns, which means that a lot of times that he'll get rattled. I think Miami needs to show him a lot of different looks that maybe he didn't see on film. And Miami does. They have a little bit of different defensive schemes. I'm sure that they'll come up with this and that. I think they're going to blitz him a little bit more. Certainly, I mean, when you take a look at, as you said, running the ball, they do run the ball pretty well. I mean, but their offensive line, which has been, guys, that, I mean, you follow Virginia Tech as long, forever, and their offensive line has always been huge. It's been key. They've had All-Americans. They have, but they don't have that, and that's the thing. So that's where Miami's quickness up front, I think Leonard Taylor, players like that could have big games, because I think that, unlike North Carolina, which were pretty big at the tackles and pretty agile with Corey Gaynor at the center spot, they don't have that. And I think that's the big difference. I think that's a huge difference. I think Miami's going to win the line of scrimmage battle where they haven't, in a couple of games this year. So I think that's key. Limit them to, limit their big plays. You already know that if they throw into the secondary, Miami's been pretty good. Ivy's come around. We know Cam Kinchins. I think he's developed into probably the best defensive player that they have. Everybody kind of making excuses why, a couple of people aren't playing. So I think those excuses are over. This is a lesser team. Because certainly they wouldn't be 7-point favorites if somebody said, well, Virginia Tech's just, they're this close. Well, you don't just get 7 points on the road at homecoming in front of a, packed house because the other team is promising. So they've got an opportunity to, like you said, and like Vish said too, put the dagger in early and, race out to that big lead, hush that crowd down and then build from that. But you can't let them stick around, because even, whoever, the worst of teams, if you give them an opportunity, and one thing, here's the thing, you got to be able to stand the onslaught of that energy that they're going to bring out. I mean, it's inevitable. They're coming out of that locker room. They're going to have all their alumni there. They're going to have everybody there, and they're going to be sky high. But once that wears off, you are who you are. And that's what Miami has to play on.
Yep. Fair enough. Vish, your thoughts on what the what the defense needs to do.
Yeah, and just to Blue's point, you can see they have not been – the reason we're favored by 7 is they have not been competitive for most of these games. Like, they're not just 2 and 4. They've been, 3 of those are blowouts. So – that's where the margin's coming from. So defensively, get off the field on third down. We were terrible at that last week. And then when we stopped on third down, they converted fourths. And these were not, short yardage. We gave up a lot of long yardage, third and fourth downs. Like when you get to you always talk about winning first down, getting the other team off schedule. We actually did that last week, and then they converted like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10.
They did.
So get off the field on 3rd down, and then no coverage bus. We have given away easy touchdowns the last 2 games just with coverage bus. Playing strong defense. If you recall the Middle Tennessee game, we came out and played really good defense at the beginning of the game. And then the bus started happening. We just started giving up these chunk touchdowns and long plays because of coverage bus. So Kevin Steele talked about that, said, doesn't know, can't really explain why it's still happening, but working on addressing it. We'll see if they did. Because to me, that's where the bulk of the problem is really the chunk plays. We're going to have too many big plays. And most of the time it's because miscommunication in the secondary. And so those are solvable problems. If it was physical, it would be worse. Like we literally couldn't stick with their receivers and all, but it's generally receiver passes. I mean, the corner passes out to a safety that's not there.
Yep.
Things like that. So those are clean upable. So let's hope that happens.
And last but not least, one key game. So one key to the game, excuse me. We'll do 3 keys, obviously, but 1 each. And we'll go back around the other way. So we'll start with you, Vish. What's your 1 key to a victory now for the Hurricanes today?
No turnovers. Don't turn the ball over. That's a huge momentum thing. Blue mentioned the crowd. Even at 12:30, it's going to be packed. It's homecoming. You don't want to get rattled and start turning the ball over. So protect the ball. We had obviously a key fumble last week, and also, I mean, it was desperation time at that point, but it did end the game with an interception. So if we play clean, all these things Blue talked about getting out early, all this to keep the crowd down, keep the momentum down, and so protect the football.
Speaking of momentum, my key to the game is it's no big plays on defense, right? Do not give up big plays on defense. You don't give up big plays on defense, the momentum does not shift to Virginia Tech. You kind of hold them down, and you should be able to win this game. Blue, what's your key to the game?
Miami needs to control the tempo of the game. It's simple. I mean, they've got to do what they know how to do. They can't play to what Virginia Tech. I mean, because all week long they've practiced on what they've seen out of Virginia Tech in the first 6 games. So I say control the ball, control the tempo, and then on defense make the big plays. I mean, but both of you guys came up with great points because that's all encompassing of how you win. And obviously when you make big plays, hopefully you're not going to make penalties because that could really hurt. The very fact that, I mean, you're coming up with making a big play and then all of a sudden way across the field, something that doesn't even pertain to the play and you lose 15 yards because that takes the wind out of the sails really quick.
Yep, I agree. Thank you guys for joining us on the show, Vish and Blue. We'll have a post-game wrap-up as well with DJ and the crew. Make sure you keep it locked here. Thanks for following us on the 6 Rings Canes pregame show. And we'll be back on after for post-game. We'll see you guys soon. Go Canes.
The 6 Ring Canes show. Yeah. The 6 Ring Canes show. Yeah. The 6 Rings Canes show. You know.